this video is a video just showcasing the telekinesis function which I've created and which I spent way too long on. It must have been about 5 to 9 hours I spent on this one function, but I wanted to make sure to take a video of it, just kind of prepare for the portfolio and make these production videos. So the main function of the telekinesis is going to be that the player can pick up certain telekinesis prop objects. I'm simply in my testing map at the moment. It's based on the first person example map, but I've just kind of changed this text here to say testing. My R3 levels are held in this folder, but for the feature testing I want just an area where I can simply test features and make sure things work as the way it should. So at the moment the telekinesis prop is working perfectly. Not perfect in the sense there's still a few fixes that could be ironed out here and there, but the main feature and functionality is working now as expected after I think I must have spent about 4 to 5 hours in outline function, which is now thankfully working, but I'll explain that in a second. So this video is going to take a tiny bit of time, but just so I can prepare for the portfolio. So if I press play on this, first of all, whenever the player encounters a telekinetic prop, these props are probably going to change in variation in object size and everything else. This is just simply a test, but the materials will change as well. However, the outline, you can see a small white line go around the object whenever the player is looking at it. This was the most problematic area in terms of making sure it works, because whenever the line trace fires, it will fire and then the outline should show. And you can see sometimes when the crosshair goes over it, it does work that time, but there might be other times where it doesn't. This now it seems to work in. Yep, there we go. There's a tiny bit of lag in that, but I probably can fix that at some point in the future. So in terms of the actual functionality, it is simply going to lift off the ground, bring it towards the player, and then something will happen afterwards. So if I press T in the keyboard, which is also the input action into the action mapping, so T is pressed, goes to the time frame, brings towards the player, and it does that spin rotation mid-air, and also does this jitter animation, or jitter function I should say. So it will basically showcase to the player that telekinesis is in action, and gives us a sense of telekinetic power kind of flowing through, which I wanted to make sure was happening. And also this is built upon a tutorial video which I'd followed rigorously. Just had to make some tweaks here and there to make sure everything works as expected, but all in all probably about 8 to 9 hours for this one kind of feature. So we'll talk through the blueprint in about 2 minutes. So first of all, the player can hold on to this indefinitely. They don't have to press anything after they've pressed T for one time. It means they're not kind of holding down a button. For example, one of the spells I've got is basically just a simple point light feature, where if the player holds down a right mouse button, for example, it's going to give a bit of a torch. But that's for my R3 levels. There's one level where it's kind of focusing a forest and it's very dark, so that's why it's a torch, but you have to hold that down to make it work. In terms of telekinesis, however, you simply just press a button and it holds, you don't have to do anything else, so it's better for that user experience flow. In terms of the actual telekinetic prop, the player can throw this and a sound will play when it is flung. Sparks VFX will fly off it, and then whenever it hits an object, sparks VFX will also hit off that object. So for example, pressing T at the snow, it gets flung and the sparks fly, and you can hear that lift off. You can also, whenever I pick this up in a second, you'll hear a lift off sound, and then you hear the flying through the air and when it hits an object for the sparks. So the sounds in the VFX was referenced and sourced, but the blueprints were all also made and created by myself with the help of the tutorial, of course. So simply pressing T to lift it off brings it towards the player, and it also can be held mid-air and brought back towards the player. So for example, if I get timing right, which can be a bit of a task, but we'll see. So I'm going to simply throw it, and I'm going to pick it up mid-air again, and it can get flying around also. So yeah, that's the main functionality of the feature. And the good thing is that I can probably apply this to certain enemies if I decide to make enemies in my portfolio if I have enough time. So yeah, all in all, I'm very happy with the feature overall. It definitely took a bit of fixing here and there, and these videos are simply just for production processes to be included in the portfolio, which I'll probably kind of post on Facebook or places like that until I'm ready to kind of implement them into the main portfolio. So I'm going to just do it one more time just to showcase it once more without me talking. and that's the main feature. So as you can see, you probably noticed there that sometimes it hits off a random collider. So that could be, for example, just even the text. There might be a small collider in that, and it's just hitting off that. Or it might be something else over here. But in general, the function will the feature works, and that's the main thing. So I will be sure to look into certain fixes for some things that need ironed out. In terms of the actual blueprints, this is where the main work comes in. So I'm going to exit that, and we're going to go through our telekinesis. So first of all, I'm not going to go too in depth. I'm just going to go a bit of I talk through some of what the stuff had said in the tutorial, talk through what happens, and basically explain how I've made this function work. So in terms of the event graph, this is attached to the first person player, the character. So this section is not relating to the telekinesis. This is just simply for some of the spells and some fire toggles. But for the telekinesis, it starts here. So there's an input action of the telekinesis. So that input action is tied to inputs on the project settings. Once the project settings is then said that T will fire telekinesis, it will then go through a branch. The branch will say as a boolean that telekinesis is also conditioned. The true value goes into the push, and then the false goes into if it's valid. That means if the object is valid at a time, it will say that the current prop, which is here, that current prop is going to be a telekinetic object, and it will pull towards the player. It then goes through an event tick, and that's also called every frame, but it's run through the logical boolean value if not A, if it is then branched into the detection of the actual telekinetic item. So again, that's kind of referenced in the outline, but we'll go into this function in a second. So basically these functions tie to this. So this detect telekinesis item ties to another function up here, and you can see functions on the side. So anytime you see something that says with this kind of symbol, that's saying that it's pulling from another function. So that's not relating to, so that's the main telekinesis in the event graph for the player. In terms of detecting, now this is where the biggest amount of bug fixing came in. For this outline, it was the most problematic area to kind of create, and this section worked perfectly. It goes through, it gets the camera location. So the camera is here, and it's running through on the camera. We've got an array, and this outline material is source and reference again from the tutorial. But that outline material will basically allow a small white line to be put around the object when the player looks at it. But that only happens once this is all done. So basically, that's the function start. So that goes into the line trace. But the camera, it gets the world location. I won't go into too much, but it gets 4 vectors world locations, and it goes through the starts and ends points. It then also goes through an object array, a make array for an object type. And the telekinesis is an object setting that I've actually employed into the project settings, and it's just simply saying there's another object type, and that's also telekinesis. So that's any object that can be pulled using the telekinesis function, and that means that you're not randomly picking up some random object in the map. So that then goes through the line trace, and once the line trace is done, so the line trace is basically whenever the player looks at an object, there's going to be an invisible line. The best way to describe it, it's going to be an invisible line that hits and fires through a camera. The camera will line trace it, and then that means that object is also hit. So when the line trace hits an object, this is the out hit, it goes into the break hit, and that means that whenever an object is hit, it stops, and it fires this function. So first of all, it goes for this branch. The branch is very important, so it goes for return values in the branch main. It then goes through true and false, but true goes into a highlight, and the highlight is also is also tied to a telekinesis interface. So I'm not going to go into what the interface is, but it's just some extra, just an extra interface just for the highlight to work. Because I don't want to drag this on video too long. So the current prop goes into target, the highlight, and then the set. But the interface itself doesn't have too much information on it. It's just mainly for the actual telekinesis highlight. So once the false goes in, it goes through the highlight, it gets the current prop, and it sets it. It then also, there's a kind of just a small node here just to kind of separate the tracing, because you don't want a big line going right through the blueprint, so just kind of makes it a lot cleaner on the blueprint. So that's the main detect telekinesis item. But yes, it was originally a sphere trace, but the sphere trace didn't work after a lot of fixing, also helped with the lecture. We worked out that the line trace obviously is much better just for a line trace for objects, and the actual issue with the line trace wasn't to do with this blueprint. The blueprint was all good. It was only because of a static mesh not applied to the prop, which is this. So it's just simply because there wasn't a static mesh on this, and that was it. That was what threw off the full outline. So in terms of the blueprint, it worked as expected, but we did keep it to be where is it? To be the line trace itself, just for the line trace for objects instead of the sphere trace. However, it would have worked just equally the same. So that was the main detect telekinetic function. Now time for the push. So the push, sorry, I'll start with the pull because otherwise it would. Actually, no, I won't. I will start with the initialize pull function, which is on the prop here. So, the event graph, first of all. I'm not going to go through too much of this. Basically, this section is just tying to the various functions. But the main part I'm going to talk about in the video is the lift of the object for the event graph of the prop. So it lifts off, and that's also a custom event, just simply by also getting the custom event here, adding the custom event, and then getting a lift off. It will then play that sound, so that sound you heard of the lift off, that's getting played there. And the highlight goes through, also referencing that highlight I showed a second ago, and it's getting the set in the actual location. So it's getting that to location, and that's also the actual location of the prop. It's going to set to a lift start, and that's been a current vector value, which goes through another set, and then it goes through a timeline. So first of all, the get actual location obviously changes in the z axis because your x-axis your x-axis is not your vertical. Your y-axis isn't the vertical, but the z-axis is the vertical. So that's your lift height. So lift height is simply 150. So that's how far it goes up into the air. You don't want it to be too big that it just flies off the map, and you don't want it to be too low that it just does not lift. So it's 150. It was 202, but I'd say the 150 is probably better for it, for what I was looking for anyway. So the set goes through a lift complete. That's again variables down the side. So you'll see here all of my variables. That's relating to jitter, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the main lift is just this one here. It's just a float. So it goes through the lift and the timeline. It goes through a timeline also to say how much the curve time it takes for that lift to happen. So it's simply 0.50, and it's going from 0 to 0 to 1 1. Sorry, not 1 1, 0.5 to 1. Wait, was that right? Yeah, 0 0. Yeah, 0.5, and then the value is also 1. So that goes through there, and then it goes through an update. The update gets to the actual location, and then it goes through another track. So this track is basically just alpha. It's just because I haven't named it, but the alpha track goes through the lerp, and the lift start goes through the A, and the lift complete also goes to the B. And also when it's finished, it initializes the pull function. And that is the main, what the main idea of the lifting up is. So this, I'm probably going to end the video in a little bit now, but I'm just going to run through quite what these are. So this prop status is relating to a state and saying if it's pulled, pushed, or default or lift. So you see here that that's also saying pushed, and that's relating to when events pushed. And also here, when it's hit, it gets a hit function, which is again created up here. So I'm just going to probably run through it, just going to scroll along, see what you see what's happened with the gravity and the hit functions and everything like that. So it just goes through a simple function about how bouncy it is when it hits the surface, and also to stop the gravity whenever it hits a surface, so it just drops to the ground, does not keep trying to go through a target. And then it will spawn the spark, spawns the sound. After that, it will obviously, before that, it will go through the reach target, and this blueprint simply allows the object to reach the target. And then it goes through the telekinetic jitter, which is this, and this is also the integers. So the integers are here, and these counters are that's a 60 frame counter, I think. No, sorry, that's not 60 frame. It's the jitter frame time. Yep, that's 60. Sorry, jitter frame time is 60. Goes through also the equal, and the branch to the sets, and then the random integers within the range of 20 to 30. The random unit vector also goes through a 500 float to times it. and the static mesh goes into add impulse, and it gets that really nice flow and smooth flow of the object being fired with a nice speed to it as well. But the speed itself is finally, this is probably the last point on the video, it's going to go through the push and pull functions. So the push function, sorry, I'll start with the pull. So the pull function is whenever the prop is lifted up and it'll pull towards. So the current prop gets lifted up, goes through itself, it gets telekinesis, boolean, gets character movement, current props pull towards the player, and that's it sorted. That's the object simply pulling towards you. Pulling towards the character with the help of the interface, of course, as well. Or at least with little help of the interface. And it goes through the sets and the character movement for the pushes. So this is the push function. And it goes through, it gets world's location as a first person camera, which is that obviously. So it gets this location and it brings the object towards the player. But first of all, it wouldn't look the best if it would suddenly flow into the camera. So that's why there's a small, tiny scene component here, and it's called the Telekinesis Source. And this means this is where the object gets brought towards, because you don't want it to go towards the camera and the player can't see anything. So that's why this Telekinesis Source is brought out a little bit, and that's why the object spins. Is held at that location, and also there's also a spin, of course, applied to it as well, to give it that flexibility. So back to the push function, where does it get too many things open? Oh shit, I'm on it. Never mind. It is in the first person character. That's what I'm looking at. I was thinking of the prop there. So it gets the push function, and it goes for this world location again. So it gets first person camera, gets world location again, 4 vectors, and it gets this value, which is massively big, just so it doesn't conflict with anything. Gets to add vector addition through here, gets obviously visibility, and this line traces. So this is where the object gets flung to, gets out impact point destination. This is called. It goes through the push, goes through the set, and that is the feature completed. Just there's a few things here and there that's been missed in the video, but apart from that, that's probably about 7 to 9 hours of work, but all in all, I'm very happy with how it turned out. So just one more time, after you've seen the functionality in the blueprints. So that's that, and let go. And that's the telekinesis function, which will be talked about in the portfolio as well in written form, of course, and the jitter as well, which you can see happening there. But yes, telekinetic function is done. And thank you very much for watching.